Hello everybody, this is Don Rosenberger. I'm making this video for recent participants for my light painting workshop at Old Car City in November 2019, but it'll be up on my YouTube channel and obviously available for anyone that would like to view it. What I was telling my participants during our workshop was that I recommend Bridge. And as you can see, I do use Lightroom, and here's the pictures in Lightroom, but for the purposes of just my workflow, and there's with Photoshop and those type of tools, there's always more than one way to get to your destination. So for me, just the easiest thing to do, I highlight the group of files that I want, right click on it, and I first open with Camera Raw. Now generally, in this case I'm using auto white balance, and you can see it does bounce around a little bit. So this would be one place that if you wanted to say have a consistent white balance, you could just say, okay, we're going to go with 4800 plus 24. So in that case, we highlight all the files and we move. Okay, we're at 4800. Oops, 4850, 4800, and then I said plus 24. Well, 23 is close enough. So I've applied that to all of the files. You can see where my cursor is here, that this little, looks like little sliders, indicates that the change has been made to all the raw files. So then we'll start off, and actually I'm going to go up here. This was my first shot of this old truck, and it's just, I meant to light it overall. Just, this is kind of what I'm going to use as a base image, a starting point, and I don't need to make any adjustments to it at this point. But then I'll go through my images and say, okay, do I need to make any adjustments to the other images? This one's actually not bad either. You can see the histogram here in the top right, that it's not clipping or anything like that. I'll show you if I brought the exposure up. There you go, it's starting to clip now. So you'll see it goes up on the right side, but let's bring it back. So even though that left front bumper, right side of the screen, but for the vehicle it's the left front, is it's bright, but it is not blown out. There's still plenty of detail there, so I'm going to leave that just the way it is. I'm going to make a quick run through the images, maybe just tweak the exposure just a little bit on a couple of them. Not a lot of changes. For instance, this one's just the background, and so I'm going to bring that up 1.5 stops, give it a little more detail. Here's some trees in the background. It's I want to have something beyond the truck. If I just have black, then the truck has no depth. It would look like a cutout truck on a black background. So, and I'll make overall contrast adjustments and things like that once I have the completed image. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video here, and then we'll start up after I make all the adjustments and load these into Photoshop. So, okay everybody, I'm back. I've made all the adjustments. There was even one file in here that I had to, instead of increase the exposure, I had to pull the exposure back. It was the second to the last one. It was this grill. You can see it's minus 1.63 in its original configuration. So you see the top right little triangle here, highlight clipping warning, that was on. So it's just a little too bright, so I brought it down 1.6 stops or thereabout, so that now I just have detail. So anyway, and then there's one file that I'm not going to use, but to go ahead and get started, I'm going to click on the first file, the last file, hold the shift down while I clicked, and then I'm going to unclick on one file right here. I was just trying to throw a little detail light on the left front tire, but it turns out you couldn't see the left front tire from the camera. So out of all these files, there's a number of them that let's see, 14 out of 15 selected. So I'm going to open all those. Just real quick, I'm going to show you down at the bottom of Camera Raw. This is what I recommend. Your color space is ProPhoto RGB. It's the widest color gamut that's currently available. Converting for the RAWs into 16-bit files, and 360 pixels per inch. I recently saw Nikon ambassador Vincent Versace recommend that setting, and I've always found his technical advice to be excellent, so that's good enough for me. Anyway, so I'm going to open these all as images in Photoshop, and then once I get them into Photoshop, we'll start up again. Alrighty. Okay, so I've loaded all 14 images into Photoshop as individual images. You can see across the top of the screen when I click on the different images, different parts pop in. And just to let you know, this image was made with a flashlight rather than an LED panel. It's a little different look. A little more uneven. I like both methods. There wasn't a particular reason. Then I wanted to do some with the LED panel and then some with this. So, okay, now how to do it. So this is going to be our base image, what we're starting with. The scene is overall lit just a little bit. And I'm going to show you, we're just going to start with the first image right next to it, which is the front. I'm going to move my cursor over. Just so you know, I'm right-handed, and so I've moved my toolbar from, it's normally on the left side of the desktop, to the right side. And since my layers palette and everything else I use is over here, it just made more sense for me to have it. So I'm going to click the Move tool, which is in the top of the toolbar, and I'm going to come over, I'm going to hold the Shift key down. As I click on the image, I'm going to move it up over to the original one where I highlight it. I'm going to bring the mouse back into the image, and I'm going to let go, and it automatically aligns. If you hold the Shift key down while you move it, it will automatically align the image with the original. Now that's, when you're shooting on a tripod, it's basically just making sure the image pops right into the existing size of the first file. It's not, if you were hand holding or something, that's not going to auto align your images. So anyway, but back to this. So now I've got the layer, and when I come over here to the right lower part of the screen, and I can click the layer off, I can click it on. So the first thing I'm going to show you is the right above are what's called blending modes. I'm going to use the lighten blending modes for most of these images. So I come down, I choose lighten, and if you notice, all it's done is it's basically allowed the light pixels to shine through, and I could get away, in all seriousness, I could get away with this just fine without putting a mask on and painting these in. It works for this particular image. In most cases, I'm going to be selecting and painting. So for this one, I'm actually going to just leave it like it is, and I won't use the mask. So I'm going to go back up to the original image. I don't need to use this image again, so I'm going to click on Close. I'm not going to save, and then I'm going to go to the next one in the sequence, which is this door. So let's go ahead, and the Move tool is still selected. I'm holding my Shift key down. I'm clicking on the image. I'm lifting, dragging over to the original image at the top, and I'm letting go, and it's here. Okay, now for this one, let's go ahead and use the layer, the mask, the blend mode. So down here at the bottom, the third little icon from the left, you see this, it's like a square with a hole in it. That's your layer mask tool. So if I click on it, I get a white layer. White reveals, black conceals. Now, there's a couple different ways you could do this. Now, I I want to hide what's here. So I could come up to the edit menu, go to fill. I'm going to set the black is already selected. There's a drop down here for the types of fill, but black's already selected, so I hit OK, and it just filled my layer mask with black. White reveals, black conceals. So the original image was the door. Now, of course, I can disable. I'm right-clicking on the mask. I'm disabling layer mask so you can see the original. So a little bit at the edge of the bumper, a little bit at the edge of the fender, and then basically the door. I'm going to right-click again to re-enable that layer mask. I'm going to go up here to my tool menu, and I'm going to choose the brush tool. So I've clicked the brush tool. You can just hit B on the keyboard as well. And we're going to review a couple settings before I actually start doing any brushing. The brush size doesn't matter. We'll adjust that as we need. But the hardness is where I was going. I prefer in most of these to use a soft brush. It's okay if it's at 10% hardness or 0%, but we want a softer brush. So I'm going to close that. Opacity, I want it 100%, and flow, I want it 100%. There are techniques I use in Photoshop where I use a very low flow, but this is not one of them. The smoothing is at 0, that's fine, everything else is fine. So I come over here, okay, brush tool, that, I go to my background and foreground colors for the brush. White is selected, so right away I can start painting white on. But I'm going to show you something. If you notice, when I start coming across the front of the car or the truck, I'm making the Ford emblem disappear. That's because everything on this layer is coming through because I'm on what's called the normal blending mode. But as soon as I change it to lighten, it only lets the lighter pixels through. So you can see that here, I'll just turn it on and off. Now you see to the right side, only those brighter pixels are coming through. So I'm just painting on the right side a little bit. I'll go ahead and hit the ground a little. Just to throw a little, I like a unevenness. I don't want it to look like, I don't want my light paintings to look like one big strobe went off and lit the whole thing. So I kind of embrace the unevenness of it all. And the neat thing about this, I'm going to show you something else here in just a second, but let me finish up with the door. And I like to keep the other image ready or here until I decide to close it, because I want to come back as a reference and go, okay, is there anything else from this that I want to grab? Well, actually, there's a little bit of light on this little plant that's coming up, a little bit on the side here. So what I'm going to do is just make my brush bigger, and I can just add all that in with one stroke. Okay, that's all there is to that. So that layer's really finished. So if I hit the slash key, it's like a backslash key. On the Mac keyboard, it's above the return key. You can actually see where I've painted. And I could sit here, I could change it back, change it back to a black or a black foreground color mask, and I can paint in areas that maybe I didn't wish to. Now you can see the top part of this door frame is still being concealed, so let's go ahead and change my brush color to white and put that back in. You can see I missed a little spot on the door, so we've put that back in. Go ahead and clean up the edge of the hood here, that back in, and you can see my brush did not go to the edge of the panel. It's okay. We'll still clean it up, even though there really wasn't anything there to come through as far as a lightness or a lighter part of the image. So just hit that key again above this. That's the back, what I would call the backslash key, and it'll show you what actually your mask looks like. So that's generally the process. So I've finished with this image, so I'm going to close this one. Now, one other suggestion before I go too far, and I'm not going to in this video have you watch me paint all 14 images in, but because it's just not necessary to see all that to get the gist of it. But I do want to save my work, so I'm going to save as. My preference is always Photoshop or PSD files. Some people like to save in TIFF. That's fine. Don't stay away from JPEG. You know, when you're working on these things, that's fine for outputting for, you know, the screen and stuff like that. But anyway, let's and then I'm going to change the name to base, and that's just so I know that that's the base image. That's the image that I'm building all this on. Now, a couple things here before I pause the video to the next stop. You can collapse all your layers here. That's just Shift. Let's see. I forgot the keystroke. There's a couple of them. There's Command E, which just collapses it into all of them. There was another one I thought with the Shift key, but that's all right. Don't worry about that. A lot of things in Photoshop, there's just multiple ways to get there. But anyway, so I've collapsed it. I can go Control Z to step back and uncollapse that. I'm going to leave it uncollapsed for right now, but once I finish this, I will collapse it all rather than save it as individual layers. It's called owning the image, I guess. I didn't used to, but over the years, I've never had an occasion to go back and re-edit something from earlier on into individual layers. So if I was really unhappy today, I'd probably just start all over again with the image. So I'm going to take a pause here in the video. I'm going to build in a few more layers, and then I'll be back when I'm getting close to finishing. Okay, I've got my layers loaded in. I can see I've got 12 layers start to finish. So I loaded 13 files. 13 out of 14, something like that. I think there was one that I opted not to use. Go ahead and close this. But this is the completed file. As you can see, it's a number of different techniques. Every layer built on here does use the light and blend mode, but not every layer is masked. Some of them I just allowed the bright pixels to come through because it was what I wanted where I wanted. Now, the image isn't finished. I've loaded everything, and one thing I'll also say, I've couple layers I had some curves. For instance, this light that's emanating from inside the windshield was not really bright. It looked bright enough in the original file, but then when I started putting it in with this, it just seemed like it wasn't quite bright enough. So I used a curves layer, that was used, what's called this little down arrow is a clipping mask. It just makes that curved layer apply to only that particular layer and not the image as a whole. So I didn't want to do a global adjustment. Now I still have I think quite a bit of work to do here, because there's areas that I want to be brighter that aren't. I want the viewer's eye to basically go to the front of the truck, to the windshield, and kind of fall off everywhere else. So I want to see it. So I'm going to bring down the foreground here in front of the truck a little bit, darken this a little bit. I might, depending on what it looks like, I might brighten the right side of the image here, left front side of the truck. But anyway, I've got some things that I'm going to play with. I don't do a lot of contrast on these images because what you're doing with contrast is it's a global adjustment. You're making your brighter's bright and your darker's dark. Well, I don't really need the darker parts here, like the background much darker, and the bright right here on the front of this grill, I certainly don't need them brighter. So that's not really, that type of contrast isn't what I need. Like maybe a mid-tone contrast might be good, where with the green paint or something like that. I'm going to do some dodging and burning, but anyway, for this video I just wanted to let you guys kind of see how I assembled the image, and how it came together. And anyway, I hope this is a big help, and reach out to me if you need any assistance. Alrighty, thanks for taking a few minutes to check things out. Okay.